Welcome to the Life of Hair. Now, in today's episode, we're going to talk about something that I haven't really covered for a very long time and that has evolved immensely in the time that I have been doing hair. And that is the good old classic half head of highlights. Now, the way that I go about my half head of highlights these days is very, very simple indeed. And I'll talk about it with the breakdown of the structure, and then I'll talk about the different kind of weave styles that I use mostly because of trends. Anyway, the first thing that I do is I take a center section right down the middle of the head. It doesn't matter where the client wears their parting, left, right, or in the middle, has absolutely no impact. And then I take a diagonal section, as you can see at the back here, that is just above the right ear. And that section is about 45 degrees diagonal, and I work across the crown area. So this is meaning that the foils are going to be much softer and much more seamless within the hair. Now, this section then travels all the way back to the first section that I took, which is from the center top section down to the back of the ear. Now, if you watch any of my videos, you'll know that I section off 98% of all of my techniques like this. Center parting, take a section from the highest point of the head down to the back of the ear, and then either section off into 4 quadrants, or in this particular instance, a diagonal line that is from the top of the right ear diagonally across, and I just work across the back of the head diagonally, as you can see on the video right now. So it's a very, very simple pre-section. You know, it's very quick to do, it's very easy. There's not loads and loads of sections. The last half head video that I did, there was quite some sections involved. Now, once we get to the back of the ear there, you can just see that last foil in the top of the frame. Once we get to the back of the ear and we've met that vertical line that came from the highest point of the head down to the back of the ear, we stop and we move to the front. And we split the front into 4 individual sections. A section that you can see now that runs right through the parietal ridge, which is the bone that is above the ear, or the curvature on the side of the head. Now, this, some of you may have seen before, this particular foiling application style, and everything's diagonal, by the way, guys. 45-degree diagonal on every single section. The foils are not super close together. Around the front hairline, they are a little bit closer together, but after that, we've probably got 5 to 7 millimeters in between each of the sections. And the style of weave that I use changes throughout the technique as well. So back in the crown area, we probably used more of a regular stitch. Around the front hairline, we definitely use more of a micro fine weave. It's not really a baby light, but it's a very fine weave comparative to the rest, just so that that front hairline is a little bit more seamless. Now, I probably recommend, depending on the client's hairline, that you do that maybe for the first 3, but it is hairline to hairline dependent on whether you need to do that micro fine stitch beyond the first 2, because the first 2 usually cover the entire hairline. You can see these stitches that I'm doing now are much more regular in size. And remember, this is just a classic half head. It's not you know, a specifically fancy technique. We still do half heads, believe it or not, even with the advent of balayages and you know, lived in baby fine highlights and all of these techniques that are wonderful to do. There's still half heads to be done. And this particular half head technique is extremely fast. I got this entire job done, applied, processed, cut and blow dried in just over 2 hours. In fact, 2 hours and 10 minutes to be exact. Now, I know from many moons ago that my half head cut and blow dry would have taken me more like 3 hours. And I think today people's time is much more precious, much more precious than it ever used to be, I find. And so if you can get your services done in a shorter time frame, generally people will be pleased with that. Now, I know there are some stylists out there who've got clients who just like to sit around in the salon and enjoy the atmosphere, and that's fantastic. And if that's how your clients are, then, you know, don't do this, because this is much faster. But if you're a slow hairdresser and you want to be faster and you can't keep to time, then this is a cracking technique. let's keep you up to date. So I did the opposite side in exactly the same way. You can see the foils just run diagonally up to the corner of the section. And then we take a section that is right on the front hairline, guys. It's so important that we take this first section bang on the hairline, and it's got to be tight to the hairline, because the amount of times that I've had people come to me and had a set of highlights and that first section isn't close enough to that front hairline, and they think they've got roots, instant roots. You know, they're complaining about the application. I had a lady come up to me just the other day as I was standing in the courtyard saying, oh, you know, you're a hairdresser, aren't you? Yeah, you know, because my studio doesn't necessarily look like a hair salon. And she started, you know, saying that she just had her hair done, and that, you know, the first foil was back from the hairline, and etc., etc. You know, people notice it. So just make sure you get that very, very first one bang on the hairline. And again, in this particular instance, the first two foils are very close together, and then they're spaced out in 5mm sections in between each of the foils. Therefore after. Now 5mm isn't that big of a gap, but it does make a big difference between doing maybe 2 or 3mm in between each of the foils, which I think previously a lot of people would have done. Now you do have to be mindful that your weave doesn't want to be too chunky, unless you're going to use one of those techniques that we've become so fond of, which is a root tap or a root shadow, to diffuse out your color. So for any newbies out there that are struggling with chunky highlights, then maybe till you get your head around doing things much finer, much more delicately. And that's one of the things that I've come across in my career teaching people, is when people have chunky highlights, it's always, always, always down to the weave. The weaves are too deep, and it also stops the color from processing quickly as well. That's the other thing. You know, your sections are fine, your color processes quickly, and you get a much more seamless result in much less time. So it is something to bear in mind, guys, that if you do your sections nice and fine and you saturate the product through the hair really, really well, you will get a better lift, and it will lift much, much faster, much, much cleaner. And quite often you won't have to tone because it's lifted so light and clean. You can always just get away with a purple shampoo. So you can see here, we work right up to the corner of the triangle. This is a rectangle section, so it goes rectangular all the way across this part of the head. And this was first created by that center parting section, and then that section that came through the parietal ridge in the front. If you want a breakdown of this pre-section, then let me know in the comment section, and I'll make a little short video to show you how to break it down. But I just wanted to sort of talk to you generally about, you know, modern half head, if you will. Like I called the previous video modern T section. I mean, you know, okay, we're being a bit, I always feel a bit pedantic calling things modern, but just an evolution, if you like. You know, sometimes we need to make our work for us, instead of the techniques that we used to do that, you know, took twice as long, and, you know, we always ran behind or whatever. If there's an alternative out there that makes our lives easier, then I always feel that is the way forward. That is the next evolution of a hairdressing technique, because if you can get the job done in half the time or half the work, then why wouldn't you? I never understand why some people continue down the same road doing the same techniques that take way too long and run them behind, when there will be alternatives to those techniques out there that will get the job done just as well. It's just about talking to your client, you know, maybe steering them in a different direction slightly comparative to what you used to do that took so long to get done. I think for me, it's one of those things that I know for a fact that the half head of highlights will never go away. They have just evolved, and this is the evolution of the application for me. Now, in a lot of instances, I do root taps on my techniques, usually only on a level 9. Didn't do it on this particular instance. I wanted you guys to see it as it was, no masking, no hiding behind the, you know, toning techniques, just so that you guys can see how this half head technique looks. There's plenty of color in the hair, and as I said, the whole job was done in 2 hours and 10 minutes. Processing time, washing off, cutting, blow drying, you name it, it was all done in that time. So I hope you found this useful, if not a bit interesting. There's something that you might be able to take away from this particular technique application and add into your toolkit on a day-to-day basis. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I will see you again next Sunday for another episode of The Life of Hair.